G'day guys. At the last meeting it was a resounding chorus for a couple of videos, and this is the first of them. This is the Sparklebait fly that Paul McGrath ties. This is my version of it, which is fairly similar. He ties them slightly differently, but the end result is you end up with a flashy bait fish profile with a reasonably large head that pushes some water. So the materials you're going to need are a wide gape hook. So in this case I'm using a Gamakatsu SL12S. You can use Tiemco 600 SPs, Owner Aki hooks. There's a whole range of wide gape hooks that you can get on the market. Mono thread, again, because we're working under epoxy. The mono thread just goes clear, so you see the material a lot better. I mean, you can use normal thread. I'm sure the fish aren't going to notice a little head of thread at the eye of the hook. The main ingredient is Sparkleflash, and in this case I'm using a silver holographic UV pearl colour with a little bit of silver holographic stuff. You can see that flashing there. Any of those Sparkleflash, Polarflash, any of those flashes are going to work for this. If you can get some fine Flashaboo, that'll even work, but the Sparkleflash probably is better, given it has slightly stiffer fibres than the Polarflash, but and it also comes in a myriad of colours. I'm just going to tie a straight silver one today, but use whatever colours you like. You can do silver with a different colour over the top, or whatever. The other option, of course, with the lighter colours like this silver is you can tie it and then use permanent marker to colour it up to whatever colours you want to have the fly in the end. Also need some epoxy, whether you're going to use 5-minute epoxy or in this case I'm going to use the Clear Q goo, which is the UV stuff. Some glue, whatever glue you want to use to glue the eyes on. I always glue the eyes on, as I said before, when I'm going to epoxy, because the last thing you want the eyes to start to slip as you do the epoxy, and then you just want your normal 3D eyes to stick on. So let's get started. What you want to do first is you want to tie in a bit of a tail. Now with this fly it's probably better to use more material than not enough material, because you got to trim the fly at some point anyway. So you might as well use a bit of material and make sure you've got enough when it comes to trimming, because what you end up wanting to do is trim the fly into the bait fish sort of shape. So what I'm doing now is just measuring up the material for the first part, which is just the tail, and you want it about 1.5 lengths of the hook back past the end of the hook, right? So that's roughly about there. So what I'm going to do is put that in. Now I taper the material, and let me try and show you how I do that. So as you can see, it's got straight ends from where I've just cut it. So all I do is sort of push the material through my fingers and then roll it. Alright, and you'll start to get a taper as you do that. If you can see there, it's starting to get that taper at the end. That's what you want to try and get. Okay, so it's a good idea to do that. It'll just save you some cutting later. You don't have to do it, but I find it easier. Okay, so we're just going to tie in a tail fairly close to the hook eye. When I say fairly close, probably just in front of the hook point towards the hook eye on a a wide gape hook. As I said, you're going to trim a fair bit of this stuff, so don't get too concerned about if it's too fat, too skinny, whatever. You've got time to make it up. Okay, so that's the first piece in. The second piece, same thing. I try to taper it first. So again, just take it, run it through your fingers, sort of push it around a little bit, and then twist it, and you'll find you get a tapered end like that. Now this one I spin around the hook shank. Now if you're going to do two colours, what you do is you put the dark colour over the top, and then you do another tie in of the lighter colour underneath. Because I'm only going to use the one colour, I am actually going to spin it around the hook shank, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, so if you look at how I have tied that in now, if I turn that around, you can see it's on top of and underneath the hook, same as if you were spinning deer hair. So just make sure you've got a few loops on it, and you can see here it's starting to build up a little bit. Okay, so once you've done that, just get the materials with your fingers like that and push it all back. Alright, and then tie in front and just try to nip the front of that material a little bit like that. Okay, so you can see it's starting to get a nice bulky head on it. This one I'm about to do is the last one, so I only do 3 stages, especially on this size. You might do a couple more if you're doing fairly large ones. But what you got to try and do with these, it's not so much trying to build up a lot of material, it's to get that bulk, and when you epoxy, you sort of got to push the material forward to get the shape of the head you want. Okay, so this is the last layer of Sparkleflash, and I'll make this a shorter layer, and the reason for that is again just to get the taper in the body as we go, rather than having to cut so much material. So we push that in fairly close to the hook eye, and again loose wrap, and then just try and spin it around the hook a little bit like that, and then tie it off, and you can see there it's around the hook again, and same deal, just pull it back over itself like so. Okay, so you can see there, got the last layer in. Now just a matter of, you know, building a little head up so that it doesn't flick forward, but don't go right back over the material. What you want to try and do is just move back so it's just touching the edge of the material, otherwise you end up with a flat spot at the front. See how that's got a bit of a curve at the front there? If I can zoom in a little bit, you might be able to see it a little bit better, but it's got that little you know, conical shape back up the fly at the front. Okay, so that's it. So then just whip finish a few times, because you don't want that to come undone. It's not pretty when it comes undone, because you get Sparkleflash going in all directions. It can be quite messy. Okay, so do that, and I'll still head cement again, because, you know, when we're trimming and stuff, you don't want to be pulling fibres out, so the little bit of head cement sort of helps manage that. Okay, I'm just going to pause for a second, get myself set up to do the trimming, because as I said, that's a fairly messy job. So let me pause, get set up for that, and I'll show you roughly how to trim the fly. Be back. Okay, so we've got our fly, and what we've got to try and do is trim it to shape. You can see the rough baitfish shape. Now, the key thing with trimming is trying to keep the scissors on an angle that is, you know, close to the taper you want of the fly itself. All right. Now, this is a 3D fly, which means it's round, you know, and fully 3D. So you've got to trim the sides and the top and the bottom. All right. And what you want to try and do is get yourself to the point. Okay, so let's take this underside. You want to trim almost straight, and any fibers that are sticking out, just trim them off, right, until you get to that baitfish sort of taper. See how that's got the taper now? And you just continue to trim all the way through there, under there. Any bits that are sticking out or flying away, you trim. But see, that's the back profile. So again, you want to try and get that taper in. So some of these ones that look a bit too straight, just get up there with the scissors. But see how I'm keeping the scissors almost straight up. They're not cutting in that way, they're not cutting that way, they're almost straight up. So if you have a look at that side now, you can see starting to get that taper in the side. Okay, that's what you've got to try and do. You've got to do that around the whole fly. It's probably going to take you 10 minutes or so on the first one. Once you start getting used to it, it becomes a lot easier. But you know, the key point there is the angle of the scissors, cutting small pieces off at the time. If you try to cut too much off at a time and you make a mistake, you're gone. End of fly. You know, so just try and do it in small steps rather than try to take big chunks out at a time until you're happy with the way it looks. Another trick, comb it and it'll sort of puff up like that, and then trim some of those off again to the same taper, and you'll end up with a good even taper the whole way around. Okay, I'll be back to put the after I've put the eyes on, and we'll start on the epoxy. Okay, we're up to the epoxy stage now. You can see I put the eyes on again. Put a reasonable size eyes on. Whether you use 3D or stick on really doesn't matter, it's up to you, but I like the 3D. They give us just that little bit extra you know, realistic appearance, I guess, to the fly, because the eye sticks out a little bit. The ones I've actually used are the new oval ones that you can get that you know, have a lot of different colours, so that you can see this is like a pearl, then a red, and then a black for the pupil. Now the thing with the eyes, if I turn this that way, you can see, making sure that the eyes are in the same spot on either side of the hook. So you need to do it from the top, and you'll need to turn the fly around to the front. Now if you have a look at the taper I've got, you've got that pointy bit at the end. I'll probably end up trimming a little bit more out of here once I've done the epoxy. Any of these pieces that are sticking up, we'll just make sure when we put the epoxy on that we push some of those down. But you can see if I turn this around front ways, you can see the eyes, but you can also see that the fly's got a profile, okay? And that's what we've got to try and get. That's the key thing with the Sparklebaits, is getting that head profile. Okay, so as I said, the next step is doing the epoxy. I'm actually going to use clear goo. Use 5-minute epoxy if you want. The principles are the same in terms of getting the epoxy on. When you start with the epoxy, start at the eye of the hook, work your way back. Don't start here and push forward, because don't forget you've got short fibres here at the front. If you start here and push forward, you're going to push those fibres up, and they'll be very hard then to set down, especially when you're using 5-minute epoxy. Once you've got it up and it starts to set, that's it. It's all over. You're going to end up with little bits of fibre sticking out of the top of your epoxy head. Alright, so I'm going to start just slowly applying the epoxy to the fly. Important thing is, you know, take your time. As I said, work from the front to the back. And you know, if you're using 5-minute epoxy, try to use a toothpick or something as well to help you push the fibres down. I don't need to do that with this, because I could just use the head of the syringe with this stuff. So you know, if any pieces come up, see that piece there, just make sure you get it and push it down like I just did there. If you want to do 2 coats, do 2 coats. If you're not real sure, I would suggest you do 2 coats and then do a very thin coat. And what the thin coat will do is get your materials to sit in place, and then do a thicker coat over the top once you're happy with how the material is sitting and how your head is coming along. So I'm going to try and do it all in 1 coat, only to save time from a video perspective. But if you want to do 2 coats, do 2 coats. For those that are just starting out with epoxy, I would suggest probably doing 2 coats for any of your epoxy flies. It's just a little bit safer in terms of you know, getting the right head shape, because once it's dry, it's dry. There's no return, so to speak. Okay, so remember before I told you about trying to get that head shape, so you want to pull the material and just sort of push it forward. And what that'll do is push the material out and give you more of a head shape than you would if you hadn't pushed it out. Okay. Now the other thing that is important when we're doing some of the epoxy is, you can see why we use a wide gape hook. There's a fair bit at the bottom of the fly that sticks down, and when you epoxy it, it's hard as a rock, right? So when the fish hits, if you are using a standard hook, the head's going to come to somewhere, you know, around there, you know, like that. Doesn't leave you a lot of hook gape to catch a fish, to actually set the hook on the fish. So that's why we always try to use wide gape hooks on these flies. Much safer option. And there's plenty of them around. you know, from Gamakatsu, as I said, you can get owner hooks, you can get Tiemco's 600 SPs. Mustard even have 68 series wide gape hooks that are stainless steel. So there's plenty of people out there that make them. Okay, I'm just trying to get the shape I need here for the head. I'm going to push a little bit of that forward. You're trying to get a reasonably conical head. You can see me pushing that material again. With this stuff, it's you know, it's important. Just try to get the shape you want and then hit it with the lamp. You've got as long as you need to get the shape. You don't have to rush it. I might end up doing a second coat underneath if some of those fibres stick up, but that's roughly the head shape I want. Okay, so I'm going to now just hit it with the UV light, and that should set. Just quickly, there's another one sticking up. I know I'm a bit of a perfectionist, but you know, if you can, why not? Okay, here we go. About 5 to 10 seconds on each side, underneath. I might end up doing another coat, as I said, but this will get it set in place. And then any of the fibres that are, you know, sticking out, you can trim once you've set the head. It just makes it easier, because then the shape of your fly is determined by the shape of the head. Okay, so that's it. That's as hard as a rock. If I turn this around now and put it towards the camera, so that's basically it. As I said, I'll trim some of these fibres underneath. Some of those ones that are sticking up at the top will also get trimmed off. So if I just get the scissors, I'll just quickly show you what you do. Just again, keep it almost flat, and just any that are sticking up, just try to get it down to the shape. Okay, so it's not that difficult, and again, I wouldn't worry about it being perfect. Once it's wet and you're dragging it through the water fairly swiftly, it's you know, it's not going to be a problem. So that's it, guys. That's your sparkle bait. You can do them in whatever sizes you want. You know, from this one's a size 2, you could go down. I've even done them on size 8s, little tiny ones, you know, about this long, and of course all sorts of interesting fish on that. 2s, 1s, 1/0s, 2/0s are you know, probably the ones that you're going to use most commonly. So that's it. If you have any questions, do give me a call. Thanks, guys. See ya.